they have to take out the infrastructure of the military, and that's the bases, the barracks, the planes, the transportation, the command and control. But they feel that the Iranian people, you feel, I feel, are captives of this murderous government. So that means you can't do things that you did in most wars. You can't hit the water supply. You cannot hit the sewage. You cannot hit the power because you'll hurt people. It's the frequency. I can see if he feels that way, he can make. But on this show, we have so many different topics, but we don't focus on just one topic. But he seems to fixate on that, and that's so ironic because of all the 20-some nations in the Middle East, it's the only democratic, non-dictatorial, open, transparent society. And it's the only place, and then to focus on Christians, the treatment of Christians when they're in enclaves or they have secondary status, if that, in most of the Arab countries, and they're flocking to Israel where they have religious liberty. And then when you look at, when they say, well, I would just say to them, what were you supposed to do after October? Take away October 7th and we wouldn't be in any of these wars. And Iran would have been close to getting a bomb, let's face it. But they precipitate it because they funded Hezbollah and Hamas, and they knew about the planning, and nothing they say you can trust. It's just a fact. And then as far as the war, it's very tricky, Jack, because they have to take out the infrastructure of the military, and that's the bases, the barracks, the planes, the transportation, the command and control. But they feel that the Iranian people, you feel, I feel, are captives of this murderous government. So that means you can't do things that you did in most wars. You can't hit the water supply. You cannot hit the sewage. You cannot hit the power because you'll hurt people. So you have to be very selective. And it's possible now, given satellite imagery's, fantastic progress, where you can see almost anything, and then these precision drones and precision weapons. So they have to keep taking out the leadership, so they establish a principle, and they're starting to see news reports about it, that if some of these barracks and regional commands don't have their senior commanders, because if I could use a kind of a macabre contrast, if somebody in Iran said, I'm taking out all the conservative columnists in the United States with drones, and I saw a lot of my colleagues taken out, I hope I would stay there, but I would be looking up at the skies every 5 minutes. And that's the kind of atmosphere they're creating. And so, but they have to be careful, because if you do too much damage, then the people who have just been slaughtered to the tune of 30,000 protesters shot, it'd be just like here in the United States. If some sympathetic power was trying to help us, but they were destroying infrastructure, we would be ambiguous about their help. And so it's a really tricky business. And there's about 3 alternatives that can occur, Jack. The first is, I think, what everybody wants, and that is a regime change. And that would mean that at some point, the regular army, and not the Quds Force, the Revolutionary Guard, any of those people, they would stand up and say, I don't want this anymore. It's not working. And they would feel confident enough that the people would support them, and then they would take control in a transitory government. And then you would have in 6 months an interim person. It might be the Shah's son. It might be these dissident groups that are formally organized in France and Europe to come in, people from the United States, people indigenous inside Iran, and they would have a revolutionary Congress. I don't like the word revolutionary, but they would have an interim government, a parliament, and then they would have elections. That would be the ideal situation. The second alternative is less favorable, but it's more likely. And that is, we're going to do so much damage to the military that they will not be able to, I think we can do this, keep the Straits of Hormuz open, let oil prices settle down, and take out the leadership. And then someone with unfortunately ties to the old regime may come forward and say, I will serve, kind of like, I would call that the Venezuela solution, right? Where you can't put troops on the ground. There is some argument for that, but the MAGA doctrine says taboo. And after Afghanistan and Iraq, it would not be politically viable. But you could have a dissident person or a person who promises not to bring back the theocracy, and you would watch him like we're doing in Venezuela. And you would tell him, if you'd start to bring back or rearm, we're going to do what we did twice. The third time, it's going to be the end of you, if you want to do that. The third is the least palatable, but it could happen. And that means that we do this another 2 or 3 weeks, and we feel that everything is sort of in rubble that's military. We don't really worry about the government, and we do what we did in 2025. We just at some arbitrary point say, I'm done. I've set them back for 10 years, 5 years, 8 years, and you guys can go build your tunnels again, do everything, but we're going to keep mowing the lawn. We'll keep doing this, and not worry about the government. I think obviously the first solution is the most difficult and the most desirable. The second one is more likely, but we could live with it. And the third one, I'm not sure if that regime stays.
Yeah.
It'll be problematic.
I want to ask you about boots on the ground there, Victor, but first I need to pay our bills a little bit here. So folks who are watching this on YouTube or Rumble can see over what would be my left shoulder, there's a machine behind me. Usually this kind of machine people would keep in their kitchen, but I keep it here in my office. It's a Cove Pure. I love it. A lot of people now we have some perspective on our resolutions to lose weight and what happened to us over the holidays. So for a lot of folks, one of the solutions to reform was consume more water, drink more water. So, folks early in the year, they buy supplements, they try new diets, workouts. But again, the most important basic thing people should have is water, and good water, because even mild hydration impacts our energy, focus, metabolism. And when you think about all the garbage that's in our water, you're starting behind the curve before you even begin. So about Cove Pure, it changes that immediately. Its clear wave technology is certified to remove 99.9% of contaminants. Pretty much anything that isn't water is taken out. PFAs, microplastics, pharmaceutical residue, fluoride, all of that gets removed, and it's the purest water you can get. I love Cove Pure because it doesn't have a taste. People say, this tastes great. Well, it's refreshing. It doesn't have a taste. When I fill my little kettle, Victor, to put it in the well, in the machine, when I'm pouring the water in from my faucet in Connecticut with all the funk, that you could smell this aroma of bleach or something in the water. So Cove Pure gets rid of all that. When you drink it, it's delicious because it has no taste. Hot, you want it hot, you want it cold, you want it room temperature, you want 16 ounces, 4 ounces, make tea, I use it for everything. Ice cubes, drinking water, we're cooking, making soup. Cove Pure, love it. So now, folks, it's very easy to get pure water with the push of a button with your Cove Pure. So make an additional New Year's resolution. Make a St. Patrick's Day resolution and make it stick. Improve your health with clean water. Right now, you can get $200 off for a limited time if you use the link that we have here. It's Cove Pure, COVEPURE.com/VDH. Again, covepure.com, COVEPURE.com/VDH, and start getting right with water. So we thank the good people from Cove Pure for sponsoring Victor Davis Hanson. In his own words, Victor, I saw some headline about Donald Trump, implying that maybe there would be boots on the ground. Was I reading something that Trump actually said, or are people inferring?
No, he said that.
That
I think that's art of the deal rhetoric, though. I think his point was that you're never going to tell the enemy what you're not going to do. But I think he understands that there's 85% of the Republican Party support what he's doing, according to polls. 50-50 of the American people in some polls, some not so favorable. But ground troops, I think we should remember a little bit why we went into Iraq and Afghanistan from the get-go on the ground. We had tried the air campaign in the 91 war for weeks on end, and it was very successful, but we thought that it would force Saddam out of Kuwait, and it did not. And people then made the judgment you have to go on the ground. So there was a 4-day ground victory, just 4 days, and that would have been impossible without air power. Air power had done most of the work. But the point was they did not get Saddam out. They could have, but they didn't. And so we got back in, and then we had a combined from the very beginning at ground, and that worked spectacularly well in getting rid of the Taliban and regime change in Iraq and Afghanistan. But the second half, nation building, not so much. So in reaction to that, I think people said, 20 years in Afghanistan, and we still have people in Iraq. It's been 23 years, and there's still American installations in Iraq. Let's not go do that. Was what Trump called forever war or endless war. And so that's why he was very careful with the Soleimani hit and the ISIS hit and the Wagner group and the retaliation against the Houthis and the first strike against Iran in 2025 and the nuclear facilities, that these were all delineated as one-offs. And, he would do it and say, well, they had to get it out of their system, so I let them, have a performance art retaliation, or that's a one-off, or we want to make Iran great. But this time, the stakes are much higher. But I still don't think that ground troops, although they might be justified, you go in a country of 90 million people that's that big, and you'll have Fallujahs and all that stuff in the streets. There's still 300,000 or 400,000 of those revolutionary fanatic armed militias, and you can hurt them a lot more they're not worth, to quote Bismarck, who said that the Balkans were not worth the bones of one Pomeranian grenadier. They're not worth American lives going in there and fighting those people. But with air power, you can confine the losses. And we have to be very clear about this. People in the news that are anti-Semites, racist, anti-American, radicals, whatever extremist point of view they embrace, they get to a point of public exposure because they're quite skilled in demagogic rhetoric. There's been a lot of confusion, discussion, but also confusion about the idea of platforming some person or deplatforming someone versus canceling them. It came up during the Tucker Carlson interview of Nick Fuentes. I think we should make a distinction. If you have a venue, you're a talk show host, a podcaster, you're inviting someone to lecture, that's a choice that you make, and you operate within particular sidelines, parameters. In other words, you don't invite an abject racist, you don't invite an abject anti-Semite, you don't invite somebody who would like to have that forum to advance your views. And we have to be very clear about this. People in the news that are anti-Semites, racist, anti-American, radicals, whatever extremist point of view they embrace, they get to a point of public exposure because they're quite skilled in demagogic rhetoric. They're formidable debaters. If anybody went back to firing line and watched William F. Buckley debate George Wallace, Buckley had the moral and the intellectual argument on his side, but he was dealing with a man who for 25 years had spoken almost every day to crowds, and George Wallace was probably the best orator that ran for president, say in 68 and 72, and Buckley used all of his skills just to tie down Wallace, and it was a very even debate. So my point is, if you have a venue and you want to bring somebody in whom is beyond the pale, and that person is going to come onto your venue to do a couple of things. Of course, get greater exposure for his noxious ideas, but more importantly, he's coming equipped with formidable rhetorical skills. And 3, don't expect, when he has a large mainstream audience, he is going to voice all of the extreme positions that got him on the show in the first place. That was true of William F. Buckley with Huey Newton, Eldridge Cleaver, William Shockley, etc. So when you bring somebody like Nick Fuentes on, be prepared that he's not going to be transparent about the excess of his views or the extreme nature of them. He'll calm them down in order to get a bigger audience. He's going to come after years or hours, days of debating people, so you have to be at the top of your game. In the case of Tucker Carlson, there's no question that he's a very skilled interviewer, and when he wanted to pin Ted Cruz down, who himself is a formidable debater, Tucker Carlson did very well. I mean, it was almost an ambush interview, and he tried to embarrass, and sometimes successfully so, Ted Cruz. So he could have used those formidable skills to cross-examine Nick Fuentes, but he did not. So when you don't invite Nick Fuentes on your program, it doesn't mean that you're canceling him. It doesn't mean that you're deplatforming him, because he's beyond the pale. And you say, well, who are you to say that, Victor? Well, I'm not Victor saying that. There are accepted norms that you don't use the N word, or you don't call for people to go back to Israel if they're Jewish, or you don't make fun of people's race in the public sphere the way he did. You can do that, of course, under the First Amendment, but you're not invited into acceptable venues to vent those views and to spread hate. The second thing is canceling. These are options, so when you don't offer Fuentes a venue, you're not canceling them out. You're just making a choice. You make a choice every day who you invite on your show, who you talk to, where you go. But if he is so extreme and you decide either to withdraw the invitation or not to invite him at all, that's not canceling, that's not deplatforming. How about Tucker himself, which is a very different case? Tucker Carlson had a distinguished career as a journalist, as a writer, as a debater, as a conservative pundit for years. I was on his show for 6 or 7 years. He never once voiced anything that was remotely, I would consider, anti-Semitic. His father was a devout Christian. Maybe he would qualify as a Christian Zionist, a big supporter of Israel. He was a patriot. He had a very distinguished career. Tucker Carlson comes from one of the oldest families in California, the Miller Lux 19th century land development company. So he's been around for a long time, and no one had ever questioned that he was anti-Semitic. I don't know what happened in the last year or so when he decided to bring on these beyond the pale guests, but I don't think necessarily the question is to go after Tucker Carlson for bringing them on. We don't go after William Buckley. The question's more nuanced. The question is, if you bring them on, are you prepared to ask them the sort of questions which they are A, going to evade, and B, going to moderate their views, and C, use you to get a larger audience? And if you don't do that, then fairly or not, people are going to think you're complicit in an effort to spread those views, which in the case of Nick Fuentes are abhorrent. So I think everybody was shocked, disappointed that Tucker didn't use those skills with somebody as reprehensible as Fuentes. And I think they hope that he will in the future.
I think it has a lot of causes. The rank voting and the primary favors candidates like that are better organized without a lot of popular support. I think he only got 6 or 7% of the registered voters. They don't come out in primaries. There's been a vast demographic change. I think New York was about 30% Jewish. It's down to 12. And I think a lot of people thought it would be amusing at least to put him out on the stage and get all that attention, maybe traditional liberal Democrats. And then, of course, the opposition is trisected, and they can't get together with one candidate. If they could get behind, if you look at what they each got, Soa and Adams and Cuomo in the primary, they would have won. One candidate, had he got all that, they would have won by 10 points.
Correct.